Over the weekend, Epic Games made a bit of a PR crisis for themselves. Now, if you're not tapped into the Fortnite community, which I don't expect you to be, you would have missed all of this. But from nothing, Fortnite and Epic Games managed to create themselves a bit of a communications PR crisis from nothing, where saying nothing would have been a better outcome than the statement they made. And I want to walk you through it because it's actually kind of ridiculous. Now, I'm going to analyze things from like a PR communications perspective and kind of show like how they didn't need to say anything, and when they decided to say something, it made things worse. Now, this is going to be very niche information, niche drama. I find it personally fascinating because I am a person who loves watching Fortnite competitive. I love the esport. I also play a good amount of Fortnite. I also come from a marketing, communications, PR background professionally, so this is kind of a mix of all the different things that I find personally fascinating. All right, so let me dive into the very beginning. Basically, what happened to set all this up is several professional players were using a additional tool that allowed them to get information that made things more competitively advantageous for them. Now, obviously, in competitive esports, you have terms of service, you have competitive integrity. There's a lot of things that you can do that can be seen as cheating that is not allowed, right? Makes sense. I'm not going to dive into exactly what it was they were doing because that's not necessarily relevant to Epic Games and Fortnite's response. What I am going to do is set the scene for what's going on, the tournament, why that matters, and then the esports ramifications of the actions that was taken. FNCS, if you don't know what it is the Fortnite competitive series. It is the esports of Fortnite. Now, I know a lot of people see Fortnite as a kid's game, but there are real professional players who play this game for millions of dollars. And Epic Games, being the creator of Unreal Engine, they use Fortnite, and by extension, Fortnite competitive, as a way of showcasing their technology and their real big moneymaker to the world. Now, all of this comes on the heels of Epic Games having just recently laid off 1,000 people, including some of the longest tenured Fortnite devs, some of the longest tenured Fortnite designers, a lot of very, very talented people that lost their jobs. And now they've kind of gone and done this little bit of a snafu as well. Okay, so here's the scene. Right now we have FNCS Major 1 taking place. FNCS, again, Fortnite competitive series. It is the esports tournament. Now, the tournament schedule, I'll put a little graphic up here. Basically, the tournament schedule goes, you have the qualifying rounds. If you win out of the qualifying rounds, you go on to the heats. If you qualify in heats, you go on to the major finals. And in the major finals, you have a chance to qualify to an in-person LAN event in Germany at the end of this next month. Now, at that in-person LAN event in Germany, you also, if you perform well enough, have the opportunity to then qualify for a global LAN event at the end of the year. So not only could you as a competitor have made tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in the FNCS Major 1, you have the chance to play for millions of dollars in the first LAN event in Germany, and you have the chance to play for even further money in this global LAN event at the end of the year. Now, as a top tier competitor, people are always looking for an advantage, right? So a lot of these guys, they ended up using this tool that ultimately ended up being against the terms of service with Epic. Now, you had all these people using this tool, right? And Fortnite, basically starting about 2 days before FNCS Major 1 finals and up to 1 hour before the finals, made a statement basically coming out saying these specific players were using this tool. It is not allowed per our TOS. They are now disqualified. Now, the interesting thing is, I say they came out and said this, they actually didn't make any statements on it. What they did is they removed those teams from the leaderboard. And a lot of people came out basically trying to figure out what was going on. The community came together, they figured out what was going on, and a lot of the pros came out and actually owned up to it. They said, hey, this is our bad. We tried this new tool. We assumed it would be okay because it was created by somebody who has created other tools that are okay to use. Turns out it wasn't. Here's where things get interesting. Basically, the actions by Epic made perfect sense based on the TOS that they have, what has been allowed previously, and what has not been allowed previously. It made sense, right? The community was able to put 2 and 2 together, made sense. It sucks. A lot of these really big names, including former global world champion players, were gonna miss out on this huge opportunity. It sucks. It's a bad situation for a lot of those players, but they accepted that it was the consequences of their own actions, right? All seems well and good right now. And as of right now, Epic hasn't put their foot in their mouth. They've actually been doing okay. An argument can be made that they need to improve the communications aspect of how they communicate these disqualifications, but that's a separate conversation. Fast forward to day 1 on Saturday of the Fortnite Major 1. We are now 3 games into 6 being played on Saturday, and there's another 6 games to come on Sunday. We're 3 games in on the North American region. It's the second largest region behind EU, and Fortnite comes out and they make a tweet. Now I'm going to show you 3 of the 4 paragraphs of this tweet, and you're going to be like, Dak, there's nothing wrong with this tweet. Wait until I show you the 3rd paragraph. Let's walk through it together. I'm going to read it here. We have realized there is legit confusion on whether Fortnite competitive rules allow for the use of drop calculators. This is the tool that they're using. I'm not going to explain it because it's not necessarily relevant to the response here, which have evolved from being static websites to real-time tools connected to the game that you're in. This confusion stems from the current phrasing of our prohibition, using any kind of cheating device, program, or similar cheating method to gain a competitive advantage from our official FNCS rules. Now, I would disagree that there's confusion. I don't think there was confusion. I think people came to the realization, they're like, hey, I used this tool. Turns out I shouldn't have, and I got justly disqualified from the tournament that I used it in. For some competitors, that was FNCS qualifying rounds. For other people, it was from like a different evaluation tournament. It was other tournaments, right? So far, we're fine. Okay, yeah, it's not allowed. Makes sense. The DQs stand. We're good. We will be updating this to reinforce that these devices, programs, and methods are prohibited if they have any access to the real-time state of the game being played, for example, through memory, screen loading, screenshots, audio, network traffic files, overlays, etc. Right? All that makes sense. This will include overlays that feed real-time screen information from the Fortnite client to competitive advantage analysis tools, whereas things like informational web pages that don't access the current game state are okay. Makes perfect sense with the understanding of the rules that everybody has. We're going to skip the third paragraph, and we're going to go to the last one. All future use of these tools is banned, and if the tools have access to the game state. Great. That's a wonderful statement. It clarifies it. It's the first statement that we've gotten from Epic Games and Fortnite to kind of explain this situation. It makes perfect sense. It reinforces they've taken a good stance on it, right? Because historically, Fortnite Competitive and Epic Games have not been the greatest at taking a stance to truly reinforce the rules that they outline for competitive integrity. Again, this is an esport where people play for millions of dollars. There are massive brands involved in this. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. And again, they just recently laid off 1,000 employees, right? So they're kind of treading on rough public perception right now, right? So if you are in charge of PR, communications, you want things to be very specific. You want things to be super clear right now. You don't want to have any chance to garner any further poor public will from the game base, the player base, from other major companies, from the community, like the broader society as a whole. Like, you want people to like be on your side as a major company, right? Let's go back and read the third paragraph. Given the confusion on this, again, I don't think there was any confusion. Disqualification of these players was a mistake, and the disqualifications will be removed from their record. Tell me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that just contradict directly what we just said up here and in this final one? It is against the terms and conditions. It is bannable. It is disqualifiable, and that any future use of them will be bannable. But now those disqualifications aren't. It makes no sense, right? It contradicts itself in the internalness of this message, right? The bad news. Due to the tournament timing. Now, let me explain to you when this tweet came out. During the middle of the third game of the finals tournament. It is live happening with literally hundreds of thousands of live viewers. They garnered millions of views, and I'm not exaggerating, literally millions of views across the 2-day tournament this weekend, and this was during game 3 of the tournament. It is live, actively happening, and they decided that this is the greatest time to put out this tweet. Given the confusion on this, disqualification of these players was a mistake, and the disqualifications will be removed from the record. The bad news, due to the tournament timing, the lobbies are now full for this event, and it is too late for them to continue in the current tournament. Yeah, because it's currently taking place. So again, this tweet, one, didn't need to happen, and if it did need to happen, then take out the third paragraph and everything's great. You've reinforced, you've taken a stance, you've reapplied yourself to committing to the competitive integrity of all of this. Like, I don't understand. As someone who has worked in this PR and communications process, especially if you're talking live sports, live athletics, why on earth would you choose to make this decision? And also, did this not go through a legal review process? Anytime I've ever drafted any sort of PR response, it's gone through legal review. How on earth could this have gone through legal review, and yet we're saying that, like, yes, this is bannable, and then immediately saying that we banned people for using this bannable thing, but also those bans don't stand? Am I not understanding how to read the English language? Like, this doesn't make sense. Now, obviously, the fallout and the response to this was massive. People were pissed. Again, up to that point, Fortnite had said nothing. Now they've made a statement. Honestly, they made it worse by literally saying anything. You have statements like this response from Bugha, who is the former solo world champion of Fortnite, one of the most famous players. He was literally on Ellen after winning back in like 2018 it was. You also had people who are figureheads of major esports brands like 50, who is the player manager for Dignitas Esports. He came out and said, in my years of esports, this is the worst statement I've ever read from a company ever. Legit reads as, we accidentally banned 15 plus professionals competing in the regional and international championship because the tournament is ongoing. They cannot now play. Like, we accidentally banned them, but now they can't play because we're currently running the tournament. Like, It doesn't make sense. And he continues and says, if you're admitting a mistake, restart the tournament or stick true to your initial stance and keep them disqualified. I actually can't believe how they missed the mark on this. And I agree with him. They originally, through their actions, made a statement, made a definitive decision, and then through this PR and communication statement, completely flipped it on its head. Fortnite and Epic Games have now created themselves a miniature PR crisis from nothing. And again, as someone who has worked in this industry, I don't know how this statement comes out. Now, this then further snowballs. Remember, this is all happening while this is live. Fortnite is live on their own Twitch channel with, I think it's around 30,000 live viewers at the time. They have another 30,000 live viewers on their YouTube channel. I was watching a Fortnite streamer who does watch parties. His name is Aussie Antics. He had around 30,000 viewers on his Twitch stream. He had another 25 to 30,000 on his YouTube stream. So at minimum, and that's just two of the biggest ones. There are loads of others. We had over 250,000 live active viewers on the Fortnite category just on Twitch during this event. It was the highest rated gaming channel on Twitch. Their Twitch chat starts spamming hashtag restart Grands, hashtag restart Grands. Now they have a miniature PR crisis that they are now having to try to handle live. Their live casting team is dealing with this. They're hearing all this information. They're seeing the Twitch chat, and they now have to continue just pretending that nothing's happening externally. All of this is happening while the live casters are trying to present the gameplay, commentate on it. It's chaos. It's chaos in their chats. It's chaos in the communities on Twitter. Everything's starting to blow up a little bit. Again, this was manufactured by Epic Games' own communication. This doesn't make sense. So what do? Again, in a stroke of just PR and communications idiocy, they put out another statement. They follow up to their original tweet and they say, we are not going to reset FNCS Major 1. It is too far along with the current participants. Okay, so they're addressing the people saying restart Grands, fine. Now, if you're not tapped into Fortnite, which I don't expect you to be, here's where things kind of like, this feels like rage bait. The Reload Elite series starts next Friday with finals on May 17th. FNCS is one entire tournament. It's completely separate from the Reload Elite series. The Reload Elite series, you can qualify through to the Esports World Cup in Saudi. Totally separate tournament. Basically, they're saying, I'm sorry you weren't able to play in this massive tournament, but don't worry, there's a little small one you can play next week. It really felt like rage bait to a lot of the players who were, feeling slighted by this, right? So that's how day one ended. Now you're probably saying to yourself, Dak, how does this get worse? Trust me, it gets more interesting. So we fast forward to Sunday. EU finishes out their tournament on Sunday. Everything's fine on EU. Now, also, I want to clarify, this did impact EU, but to a much lesser extent than it impacted the North American region. Only one team was disqualified on the EU region for having done this. On the NA region, we had roughly around 15 different teams, including some that were favorites to win the entire FNCS Major 1 tournament. So it much more heavily impacted the North American side. But anyways, EU on Sunday runs perfectly fine. We crown a winner. Everything seems great. We are now about 15 minutes before FNCS Day 2 for North America starts. The live broadcast has started. They're on their pre-show stuff. We have 15-minute timer counting down. And Fortnite puts out another tweet. Updates to FNCS Major 1. We're adding some additional competition to FNCS Major 1 with a bigger prize pool and increased qualification opportunities for the Summit LAN event and more clarity on competitive integrity rules. New FNCS Major 1 Summit Second Chance qualifier on April 28th and 29th. Now, I'm filming this on April 27th, tomorrow is April 28th, and yesterday, April 26th, was the end of the Major 1 Finals. That was the second day of it all. A lot of the people who didn't qualify for that Major 1 Finals or who were disqualified didn't expect that they would have the ability to have another shot at this. So in the esports world, you don't really get a lot of time off. So a lot of these players are scheduling, vacations. They're taking time off. They're doing normal stuff. Same with the people in the media around this entire situation. They're scheduling time off and everything. Fortnite and Epic now announced that there's going to be another major tournament where you can kind of get back into this tournament series that you were, I guess, accidentally disqualified from, according to their own language. And they schedule it with literally a 2-day heads up. Again, that's not really the main focus of all this, but let's just continue. A 2-day second chance qualifier is being added for all regions, so competitors have an additional path to the FNCS Major 1 Summit and Global Championships later this year. All Division 1 players will be eligible for this new second chance qualifier, except those already qualified to the Summit through Major 1. Competition will take place across 2 days, beginning on Tuesday, April 28th through Wednesday, April 29th. Day 2 will have the top 50 duos from Tuesday return for the final 6 games. Great. 25 duos will qualify for the FNCS Major 1 Summit via the consistency leaderboard. Okay, the rest of this doesn't really matter. Let me get to the second part of this. They also announced a new 3-day FNCS Major 1 LAN Summit. The summit is leveling up to 150 players are now heading to Dusseldorf. That's going to be 75 teams in total instead of the original 50. The event will now be 3 days long instead of the original 2 days, and it will have an expanded prize pool, and which they haven't discussed like what that prize pool looks like, but expanded prize pool. And more teams will advance to the global championships, the one at the end of the year, from this initial LAN than we've ever had before. Friday, you will have 50. Okay, the rest of this is just format stuff. It doesn't it's not relevant here. Looking ahead, competitive integrity and in-game comms. We are updating our competitive integrity rules to add more clarity around programs that can provide a competitive advantage. Section 8.2.1 will now be immediately effective and read using any kind of program, hardware, or tool that has access to the real-time state of the game being played, for example, through memory, screen recording, screenshots, video, audio file, network traffic files, to gain a competitive advantage is prohibited. Okay, great. That's actually perfect. That's a wonderful clarification. This includes, but is not limited to, aimbots, hardware-assisted cheat devices, input manipulation devices, spoofers, mods, overlays that have the awareness of real-time state of the game and provide information or feedback that gives competitive advantage are prohibited. Now that last line, that more closely kind of describes the tool that was being used, but again, that's not exactly relevant to all this. But overlays that provide a general system functionality without awareness of gameplay, such as Discord and streaming and broadcasting software, are okay. Love that. I'm a streamer myself, so it makes sense. We're also updating how in-game messages display in a future game update to reduce confusion and limit impact on your participation in competitive events. Now, I like this. I'm curious to see what that actually means long-term, and I'm going to dive into more of why this was a bit of a PR comms crisis for Epic Games, because this is part of it that really was like a major thing. We'll see you in the second chance qualifier on April 28th and on the road to Dusseldorf. Okay, great. This was really interesting. Now, the response to this has been interesting. A lot of players who missed out, obviously, are like, great, I have another chance to make it to this Summit LAN event in a month. I have another chance to qualify for the LAN at the end of the year. I get another opportunity. Great, love that. I, got disqualified from the original tournament that I was in. That does suck. But now I get a chance to play again. Like, they're relatively happy. There are some people who are kind of upset because now they got to scramble to try to figure something out in terms of getting a setup. They had vacations planned, like, whatever. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Let's talk about the communications and PR-ness of all of this, because it's truly fascinating to me. So we had a situation. People used something that was against the terms of service. They didn't necessarily realize it was, but they used something that was against the term of service. They were then disqualified from the tournament they were participating in. Okay, great. That tracks. That makes logical sense so far. Epic Games says nothing specific, and they use their normal in-game communications tools. Now, this is where I'd say Epic Games starts to kind of be at fault for all this. All they really did to communicate to these players that they were disqualified was remove them from the leaderboards. Now, there's a lot of eyes on this, and a lot of people are aware of this, and they do notice this thing. So the information gets out pretty quickly anyways, but they don't have like a specific route for communicating this. Now, if Fortnite Competitive had come out and like had a crafted statement and said, due to an understanding of the hardware that was being used, blah, 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 these following teams have been disqualified from the FNCS tournament and they're not banned, but they're just disqualified from this tournament. And these are the players that will now take their spots. That's all they really needed to do to truly take a hard stance on this from the beginning, maintain the competitive integrity of the sport. Again, these people are playing for millions of dollars. Make a statement. These people are out. Here's why. These people are in because of how they performed in the qualifying rounds. That would have been great. Did they do that? No. So that is what led to people like Bugha, who found out 1 hour before the start of the Major 1 tournament that he was actually not participating. Now, why this matters and why the timing of all this matters, because all of these teams that had qualified were practicing in like there's like community ran they're called scrims, but like practice events leading up to it, right? To where they get competitive practice, they get tournament practice, they're able to practice their drop spots, they're able to practice fighting against these other teams in this tournament, right? So they've had all this practice. Now the team that now is getting tossed in 1 hour before, are they at the computer? Are they aware they're going to play? How is it communicated to them? There's no clarity on any of this. And a lot of this confusion and all that stuff could have been avoided if Fortnite had just made a statement. Now, I agree there was confusion on who was out, who was in, the timing of all of it. What I don't agree is that I don't agree with Epic. I don't think there was confusion on why. People seem to understand why, and they seem to accept it as well. Which brings me back to Fortnite and Epic's original communication. It doesn't make sense to post something like that, and it especially doesn't read as if it went through a legal review process. The best way I can try and like describe this situation to someone who's not tapped into like gaming and Fortnite as a whole is, imagine you're watching the Olympics, right? You're watching Olympic swimming. It's very, very popular, and somebody in one of the qualifying heats wears this new type of swimsuit, right? They're wearing this new swimsuit, and people are like, that swimsuit's illegal. It makes them really fast, blah, blah, blah. They've qualified to the finals, And they only used the swimsuit in that one qualifying round because they just like, they just wanted to test it or whatever. Decided to do it in the qualifying round of the Olympics, whatever. They use that swimsuit in the qualifying round. They don't use it in like subsequent like heats, but they do, and they're gonna race in the finals, but they don't plan on using the swimsuit, right? Comes out an hour before the race starts. Let's say it's 1 hour before the Olympic finals, and this swimmer is now disqualified from the race. They don't get a race in the Olympic finals because they use that swimsuit, which people believed gave them the competitive advantage. The swimmer says, you know what? My bad. I shouldn't have worn that swimsuit. I should have just used it, later in practice and not used it in this giant, stage and global performance. Like, okay, fine. I accept it. Then imagine, if you will, the final race is started. Imagine it's one of the longer like endurance, swims or whatever, the 1500 or whatever. It's like the swimmers have done like 3 lengths of the pool, right? And now the Olympic Committee comes out and says, hey, by the way, anybody who wears that swimsuit in the future will be banned, and that swimsuit is against the rules of our tournament, but the person who was disqualified for using it, we shouldn't have disqualified them. But we can't put them in the race now because the race is actively happening. Like, you made things worse by saying anything. Now let's look at the cost of all this. Now, PR and comms is all about the cost of public goodwill, the cost of what ramifications might, take place monetarily. Goodwill-wise, people are, for good reason, kind of pissed at Epic Games and kind of pissed at Fortnite. People were already kind of upset that 1,000 people had been laid off. There was a lot of really talented people who had been with the game and with Epic since a very early period of time that were let go, and it didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. So already Epic Games and Fortnite kind of are on shaky ground with their public goodwill. Now they have this happen, and they kind of piss off their entire community, their competitive user base. The competitive side of Fortnite is the side that's really popping right now. The casual player base is there, they exist, but the competitive side is really what's drawing the media attention right now, the YouTube views, the streaming views. Competitive is really having its heyday right now. So they've cost themselves the public goodwill already, right? That's one big cost, and that is a giant cost for a game that relies on public player base. Now we look at the actual monetary cost of what this has cost them. They have now expanded their tournament in Germany, so presumably they have a rental on the space. They now have to do more while they're there in Germany. I'm assuming that's going to cost them more money. They're having to fly more teams to Germany. They're having to run more competitive stuff while in Germany. Like, the cost of that, I don't even want to be an accountant to try to think about the breakdown of all of that, but that's added a significant cost to Fortnite for running all of that tournament. They've added now this secondary tournament, which I don't know how much it costs them to run a secondary tournament, but they've added this other tournament. I'm sure there's a cost involved with that as well. So they are actively costing themselves money at the end of this. They are also expanding the prize pool in Germany, so that is an added expense. Now, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. How much of a line item is a couple $100,000? Probably not a lot. But remember, this is coming on the heels of Epic having laid off 1,000 employees, citing rising costs. I haven't even brought up the fact that they increased the price of their in-game currency V-Bucks, that they have reduced the amount of money that you get from those. They've raised their prices. Inflation has hit the gaming industry and has hit Fortnite. So they already lost the public goodwill of the public player base with raising their in-game prices. They are now losing the public support of the competitive user base. It's just a lot happening at one period of time. They were in a bad situation after having done these layoffs and the price hikes. Now they've kind of put themselves in a bit of a sticky situation. And all of this because they didn't even need to make a statement. But when they did, it was that third paragraph. The first 2 paragraphs and that final line, perfect. Great. You clarified your competitive integrity. You took a hard stance. This is allowed. This is not. DQ stand. Everybody accepts the result. They move forward. Are they happy? Probably not, because they got disqualified. But they understand why and they accept it. I do not work for Epic Games. I do not work for Fortnite. I'm just a big fan of the esport and a big fan of the game in general. And I'm somebody who works in marketing and communications. This is crazy. For the love of God, please go through legal when you make statements like this. And if I can give any advice to Epic Games and Fortnite, is have someone who is a bit more tapped into the competitive community and the esport as a whole, who can help understand how to clarify these things and how you might be able to communicate these things in a better way. We as marketers, our job is to learn how to communicate to different audiences. Whether we are a part of that community or not, we need to understand how to speak to them in their specific language, right? A lot of this is speaking in a way that feels unprofessional, for one. Definitely doesn't feel like it ever went through a legal review process, which again opens a company up for legal liability. This is a big issue for that. They're now having to cover their ass and try to add more money to the bottom line to try to solve the problem. And none of this needed to happen. I'm curious how this will all resolve. I'm curious how the global LAN at the end of May will go. I think it'll go great. Tomorrow starts day one of this second chance qualifying tournament that they've just now announced. I'm going to be watching that. I'm going to be curious how it goes. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that this is actually a big major mistake by Epic Games and by Fortnite? How would you as a PR and comms person have handled this differently? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. For one, I got to rant about something that I find super fascinating and interesting. Hi, I'm Dak. I work in marketing and PR. I'm actually looking for a new full-time job right now. So if you're hiring and you think that my take is interesting or you just want to talk to me some more, please reach out. My DMs are open. And yeah, this is super fascinating to me. All right, take care. Bye.